Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak on Citizen Television. Thank you for staying with us. In studio with me, Dan Sanomari, lawyer, Demas Kiprono, campaign manager, Amnesty International Kenya, and JM Waiganjo is a commissioner with the Independent Policing and Oversight Authority. Demas, I come to you, and this is a question that I want you to respond all. Yeah. And may I start with you, Demas? This is from Bob Owino on Twitter, and he's asking, ask the panelists, who will stand for the Kenya police families who lose their lives in the line of duty against hardcore criminals? The line between why the police officer kills and what happens if he's killed.
I think, first of all, we have to begin with the fact that policing is a difficult job. It is a very challenging job, and that is why police officers are trained intensively. Number two is that police officers have the right to use force and firearms, even lethal force, when the situation calls upon it. So this is to save life and limb, and even according to our National Police Service Act, even for property reasons, to preserve property. And so the second schedule of National Police Service Act should be emphasized, that it actually gives leeway for times, because as a society we know that there are violent people out there. We know that we have terrorists who are happy to blow themselves up. And so if a terrorist and intelligence suggests that a terrorist is here and will imminently blow themselves up, they will be shot. And when IPOA comes and asks, IPOA will be satisfied with the answer. And so let us not, first of all, blanketly condemn police officers. If we were saying that police officers were killers, then we would have over 100,000 deaths every year. That is not the case. Our numbers are between 100 and 200 annually. Okay. Yeah, so first of all, police officers, I'm not saying are criminals. We are saying that there's a problem with the approach of policing in this country. There's a problem of cutting shortcuts, whereby, because the public is demanding that crime goes down, we say, let's do this, let's just eliminate everyone we suspect of being a criminal. And in that, the right to fair trial, the right to life, the right to fair administration of justice is disappeared. Enforced disappearances and extrajudicial killings are very gross human rights violations. And first of all, they've never worked. They've never worked in this country. I usually give an example of when there was this case of touts sexually assaulting women and girls, and even taking videos about 4 or 5 years ago. The police investigated the whole issue, arrested them, they were charged, and they were taken out of circulation. You know, those criminals were dealt with according to the law, and that kind of crime actually almost disappeared. It was a wave and it almost disappeared. That's a case of policing that used intelligence, used the community, used investigations, and the criminal justice system worked. We are saying that we need a holistic look at our criminal justice system, so that police will no longer also come and say that when we arrest, they are given bail. You know, there are those arguments that we hear. Because a bail application is an application that is argued in court. Okay. Yes, that may or may not be given. Okay. And so if you have evidence that this is a criminal person, or a person who is likely to flee, then there are ways that our criminal justice system can deal with it. But if we think that it is not sufficient, then we have to have that discussion, instead of creating serial killers within our society.
Okay. Yeah. Coming to the recruitment aspect, that will be another aspect of the discussion, and we sample some of the feedback from the viewers. Commissioner, the line between when it happens on both ends of the divide, what happens to the family, for example, of a police officer who was the breadwinner?
I want to confirm that we receive 30% of our complaints from the members of the National Police Service. I also secondly want to confirm that there are very professional and learned police officers in this country. And they are the people who are holding together the country's security system. But at the same time, we do have some log police officers. And these log police officers, and I like what Dunstan raised here when he asked to whose benefit do they shoot, is that some of our police officers, the log police officers, are used by the citizenry. You have seen there are instances where political rivalry adds up with those police killings. You do not understand why that killing happened, but on investigations, yes, you find out that it has a link with a civilian. We also have instances where people want to use police officers as debt collectors, so that the police officers will come and lurk around your residences just because you owe people money, so they are used in that respect. The politicians will want to use police officers to do their bidding, to disperse a rally. And I want also to say that we had very good elections the last season because we were able to monitor and even to train our police officers to keep within the line of the elections. We have done recommendations where we have said that we need a risk allowance, a sufficient risk allowance for our officers, medical allowances for our officers, so that our officers are sufficiently compensated in the event that they lose their life in the line of duty. But we exonerate most of the officers who use the fire alarms, because as he has said, they are allowed to use fire alarms. You find there are instances where an officer has no way out but to use a fire alarm, whether in self-defense or to protect life and property. I also want to tell the citizenry not to applaud police killings. Because I know, for instance, we have done matters where we arrest a police officer, we charge the officer, and the officer is jailed. But as soon as the police officer is arrested, there are demonstrations. We have had demonstrations in Githurai, where we arrested an officer, and the officer was charged and convicted. He's serving time. He appealed, and the appeal was dismissed. But you see, it is the citizens who are saying, no, we need him. We want him here. We have an instance like that in Isri, where we have done our investigations against a police officer. We have forwarded our file to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, and we have demanded that that officer do take a plea. But the officer is protected by the business community in Isiri. Secondly, the IG is not moving. He's impervious, he's complacent. And the DCI, the outgoing DCI, is happy to use him for any other purpose. So I want to say there are all manner of things and reasons why a police officer will use their gun. But the guns are limited to only where force is required.
When you earlier on talked about goodwill.
Yes.
At the start of this discussion, before we come to Okili, goodwill, and now we are talking about the business community, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, and the acting IG. I mean, how will that be addressed then? Because there is a family on the other end, the flip end of the divide, that wants justice, and here is an officer you talked about who will be taking a plea. What is the progress of that investigation? First
of all, we have identified all the atrocities, because, you know, we are charging him with killing citizens. So families have come forward, and they have brought evidence to us. And many other killings. We are not just talking about that one officer. In Mathare, for instance, we have a whole list of murders by police officers, and we are addressing them. And those families are the ones now to come forward and give us the evidence that we require. But also, on conviction of the officer, courts do not have any mechanism in that trial to order compensation, so that the family of the family of the deceased has to go through another legal process in a civil court to sue the Inspector General of Police and the Attorney General to ask for compensation. And I want to encourage Kenyans to do that, because the moment Kenyans start suing the government, the IG and the AG, on extrajudicial killings, because killings are killings, whichever way you look at them. Every bullet, every government bullet that has killed a Kenyan, that Kenyan or the family of that Kenyan is required to be properly compensated. So if the IG finds that he's using billions of shillings every year to pay compensation for families whose loved ones have been killed, then I am sure the government and the IG will do something about it.
Yes, Wakili.
Well, you've raised a very hard question. Who talks on behalf of widowers, when police officers die in the line of duty? Who takes care of their children when they are killed? Nobody talks about that. It is a right for police officers to be killed in the line of duty. It is wrong when they kill hardcore criminals. It is a complete paradox. Two, IPOA confirms that the Isli business community have ganged up to defend police officers who are protecting their businesses. And the former DCI and all that he has named have seen value in that police officer. They want him charged so that crime goes to Isli, which was a no-go zone. It was a Baghdad. It was an Afghanistan. Today, you walk to Isli, anytime, midnight, anytime, business is flourishing. Courtesy of that police officer. Today, you go to Mathare. You can do your business there. Courtesy of those police officers who are being demonized, who are being looked for to be jailed. What is the public good? Because the question we are losing focus, is that police officer, does he shoot anybody for his own good? He's doing what he's doing by the weapon bought by the same public. The question I raised on another forum is this: then why do we need police officers to have guns? Why do we need, let us take all the bullets we have in this country and the guns, sell them to Uganda or to Tanzania. Let the police have handcuffs. Because that is the way the government wants the police to operate. I've seen quite a number of guys here writing to me from Nakuru. I've seen quite a number of Kenyans telling me that crime has gone up, and now when they are rushing to the police station, they are being told the next to this police station, there is an IPOA police station. Go there.
Okay.
Go to the IPOA. Because the police are not going to act. And I've told Kenyans, I've seen it. These streets, you cannot tell me that you're going to operate in Nairobi with handcuffs. The number of civilian and marked overt police operators on these streets, Kenyans know very well what used to happen on carjackings. Okay. Kenyans cannot forget that you could not go to an ATM. You could go to an ATM, pick money and walk out. You pick the money and you are taken. Kenyans know very well that there's a time you could never pick your phone call. If a phone call rings, the woman will run to a hotel or men will run into a safety place to pick a call. Today, everybody does business courtesy of those special units.
Okay, thank you.
We are looking at 10 people who have either been killed because they are linked to hardcore criminals or to terrorism vis-a-vis the public good of 45 million Kenyans who now are totally exposed to the ragtag militias and criminals. And Kenyans, I don't know how we are going to defend ourselves.
Okay, Wakili, you are bringing out the very important element of the nexus between human life and the public good. It's imperative, however, that anybody who commits a crime must be law and must be brought to book. That's the general consensus here.
Yes, that's the
bottom line, and to which we all agree. We'll come to the numbers in a bit, but first let's also engage our viewers who are watching from their homes and sample some feedback on Twitter. Let's start up with the first one. And this viewer says on the Twitter handle that is at Citizen TV Kenya, the hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. Godi Barasawere says many families were deprived of loved ones and responsible breadwinners through police extrajudicial killings and mysterious enforced disappearances. The officers who oversaw those killings must be held to account. Okelo Mwalimu says if it's indeed true that SSU and Flying Squad were responsible for the heinous act of extrajudicial killings, then Kenyans should be very worried. Are we about to witness formation of a more dangerous unit? Why has it taken this long before an action could be taken? Rami Butia says training, retraining, re-evaluation and reconfiguration of how the police conduct their businesses are vital. The traditional cosmetic changes where a game of musical chairs is played with the office of the IG is nowhere near enough. Oringe Waso says there must prevail a permissible, structured way through which an inquiry into extrajudicial killings by police is done. This shouldn't be an exercise where payback and revenge are dished out to the perceived perpetrators in caveats by the government. Odongo Rolok says as extrajudicial killings has gone up in this country, let the independent institutions do their job without interference by the government. Kepingano Headboy says the independence of supposedly independent institutions and departments are at risk when you have politicians at the helm. This is evidenced by the recent roadside declaration by some top government officials. Populist policies is a big no. MCRay_Lanka says Lawyer Omari is raising serious issues that if not looked at, this country's security will be compromised. Police officers are demoralized, condemned, intimidated and called all manner of names. And its Rep Harrison says this extrajudicial menace must be dealt with appropriately because it is the SSU unit who are the culprit. Then through investigation must be done to help the crying families or family an array of hope for justice. By any account, Demas, these are the vast array of the feedback from our viewers. And Wakila, the Commissioner will come to you on the numbers because we need a briefing on the convictions that you have had out of the court processes. But Demas, when you look at the psychosocial support that police officials need or members of the security service, from the salaries, the recruitment process, the medical compensation that they normally have, the cover and the retirement package, is that enough? And is the society receptive? Is there a support base for them, the street learning spot from the community level where police ought to be respected and viewed as human beings, fathers, mothers, and accorded that respect that they need and the support in terms of their workflow?
Well, I think there's a challenge in terms of police welfare, but at the same time, police welfare has, by and large, improved. First of all, by increasing their numbers. They are less stretched than they were before. Second is the issue of house allowances, where they are now living among the communities, other than living within the police lines, sometimes 2 or 3 families in the same room, which really affects even their human dignity. However, in the last 2 years, there have been at least, I think, 1 suicide every month. Sometimes murder suicides involving other police officers or other family members, which says that there's an issue of mental health. I think there's a lot of stress within the members of the National Police Service, and something needs to be done in terms of ensuring that mentally and physically and emotionally that police officers are catered for properly. And so basically, that is the direction we should go. And in all our interventions, in all our recommendations, we've said that police welfare needs to be looked at. Mm-hmm. Even their human resource, the way they deal with their bosses, the way they are transferred, should be done in a transparent manner, so that it's not that only certain people get to be in the traffic unit, whereas others are thrown into the far-flung areas. Okay. Yeah.
Commissioner,
yes.
From the advent of the commission, when the first chairperson came on board, you had a series of budget increment over time, and also in terms of the numbers that you have had between 2012 and 2018, going by your numbers, which were very many in terms of the recorded cases of extrajudicial killings reported to you. We only had paltry convictions, and we are now into another year where these cases are again coming up. I mean, what is the percentage rate of your convictions in courts of law across the country?
I would say they are higher than 50% you alluded to. And first of all, I also want to say that, like I mentioned before, I mean, our work is to investigate. Once the ODPP concurs with us, he takes the officer to court. The officer is charged in court. Then the matter is out of our hands. We will wash brief. We will take witnesses. And then once we get a conviction, because we have, like, for instance, where you've mentioned we have about 18 convictions so far, and we have about 200 files with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions recommended for prosecution, so waiting to be taken to court, while we have about 150 files pending before the judiciary. Wakili Omari already confessed that he's representing about 100. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that tells you that we have a high turnover rate. We have many matters pending in court. We have many matters pending at the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. And we have over 18 convictions where we have successfully prosecuted officers and they have been convicted. But I also want to say our work is not just to investigate officers and have them prosecuted. Okay. In fact, we are not happy when officers are prosecuted as such. Our main work is also for the welfare of the police officers. Amnesty has mentioned, and correctly so, that police now are living within the community. That is a recommendation of the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. The OCSs now have an IOU. They can spend money from the police stations. And that is where you used to hear that we do not have money for fuel, we don't have money to feed the people who are in the cells. Now they do. That is a recommendation of the Independent Policing Oversight Authority. So we make many, many recommendations for the welfare of the officers, and also to look at the facilities, the cells, the holding facilities. We go out of our way because we inspect those facilities. So our work is not just confined to the prosecution of rogue police officers. Yes, it's an important mandate that we have there, but we go wider than that. We go out of our way to make sure that also the officers themselves are taken care of properly. And I also want to fault in this forum the National Police Service Commission, because in my view, the National Police Service Commission is the one in charge of the police welfare, but they don't come out well enough to make sure that the welfare of the officers is taken care of. You remember some of the stresses you see with our officers, shooting each other, committing all manner of crimes, or even suicide, is born out of oppression by senior officers to junior police officers, particularly women police officers. They also go at sexual harassment, and if you are not, if you don't comply, then you are transferred. So families, police families are breaking up. So those are some of the issues that we have raised. We have done reports. We have given reports to the IG. We have given proper recommendations on how our officers can be taken care of, because as long as our officers have no welfare, as long as the arm that is in charge of their human resource is not active, then we have a problem that will not go away. And considering the National Police Service Commission has in its membership the IG himself, the DIGs themselves, then it should be one arm, one commission that should be very, very feasible. Even now, when police officers are being condemned, left, right, and center, we need to hear the voice of the National Police Service Commission. We haven't heard who are talking for the police. We will not talk for the police ourselves, because we are being asked, what are you doing to rein in law police officers? That is where our mandate lies. So the arm that is supposed to address the welfare of the police officers needs to wake up, because they are well-resourced, they are a constitutional commission, they are independent, and therefore we need to see more from other constitutional agencies and commissions coming out to talk on behalf of our officers, even as we condemn and take to court the rogue police officers. And also, the country also needs to know that we do not condemn police officers for not doing their work. We know for a fact, and Councillor Omari has mentioned, the officers, if we did not have police officers in this country, we wouldn't have a country.
Okay, for purposes of civility.
Yes.
And the administration of government. Because it's equally important to have established services within the security sector for purposes, but there must be accountability.
Even the SSU, the Special Service Unit.
There can never be a vacuum.
Yes, the Special Service Unit we have mentioned here. I have not seen any law that allows the DCI, for instance, to form those special services units. And there have been many. And some of them, and you will see, the extrajudicial killings are said to be killings sanctioned by the state. The state cannot extradite itself from that quagmire, because if we do not, if an enforced disappearance, for instance, happens, you go to court with a habeas corpus. Courts are very generous with orders for habeas corpus, because it is the state who should protect its citizens. So whenever a person goes missing, it is the responsibility of the state to make sure that that person, dead or alive, must be produced.
Okay. Wakili Dunstan, I come to you. When we had the paradigm shift from the Kenya Police Force to the Kenya National Police Service, NPS, following the recommendations by the Ransley report in the aftermath of the post-election violence, and the head of state, while campaigning, then Deputy President, talked about, especially when he launched his manifesto, 30th of June, 2022, talked about the independence of the IG's office, saying financial autonomy and in terms of administration, to delink it, detach that from the office of the president in terms of financial dependency. Is that autonomy important? How important is it? And in these investigation processes and the cleanup with which the government has hinted, how helpful will that be?
Well, the autonomy of the police force is grounded in Article 245 of the Constitution. The office of the Inspector General and the National Police Service Commission. That is a commission that is supposed to be independent. what the president did is exactly what is supposed to be done by law. The question is not about funds being released to the OCS to feed people who have been arrested. The question is about the independency of decision-making, the operational independence of the National Police Service. When you look, Commissioner here, Commissioner is saying the DCI forms special units. It's not true.
Who forms it?
The DCI is a very junior officer. The DCI reports to the Inspector General of Police. The DCI has no security of tenure. George Kinoti and Mohammed Amin have no security of tenure. The person who has the security of tenure, constitutional security of tenure, is the Inspector General of Police. Above the Inspector General of Police is the Minister for Internal Security at policy level. When special units are dealt with and they are formed, that is what is called the National Security Council, chaired by His Excellency, the President, deputized by His Excellency, the Deputy President. What used to be chaired by President retired Uhuru, now being chaired by His Excellency William Ruto. These are national security questions, and that is why they are special. All security organs meet at the National Security Council. That is where the questions about the security of the country is dealt with, and authority is given for these people to operate outside the law. And that is why, whether we discuss this matter, until we open up that animal called the National Security Council, we know what goes on there. We will be scratching the heart. But let me deal with...
Hang on, Wakili. As a matter of law, as a matter of constitutionalism, as a matter of democracy, when you say operation out of the framework of the law, I mean, isn't that damning?
Constitutionally, it does not make any sense to have special units.
So what is the legal recourse then?
That's the dilemma.
What is the legal recourse?
That is the dilemma.
For example, just hang on, Wakili. The head of state, Ambassador number 1, numero uno, he is the diplomat number 1.
Yes.
He is the senior most employee in the country who is employed by the Kenyan people. And still he is accountable. The president can be impeached by parliament. He can be... Of course, there are other accountability measures and checks and balances. So what happens to this then unit that you have mentioned? I mean, where is the legal recourse?
Now that we are opening, the president himself has said the police are killers. The discussion is opening up, and that's why I said it will open up to the point of Kenyans knowing what are the issues that, and how does the National Security Council operate, but at what risk to the security of the country.
Yes.
Allow me. There's something I was saying. Allow me 1 minute.
Briefly, okay, finish.
You talked about the National Police Service Commission. The welfare of the police officers. I'll tell you for free. I was in court representing more than 200 graduate police officers who, other colleagues who are graduates in public service, are earning and entering job group JK upwards. The police officers who are graduates, they will start earning a salary of a constable, and yet they have degrees. We had to battle this matter in court. The court and police officers, in that matter, and Citizen aired some of the pay slips. I don't know where IPOA really supported us. Okay. Those police officers were earning 200 shillings per month. How do you expect a police officer earning a net of 200 shillings? He has a gun. He's totally frustrated. His wife is telling him, don't come home without unga. Then a mere provocation on the street by an irritant citizen, you expect him to... So let us also address the welfare completely of the police. And the National Police Service has completely let down all its employees.
Oh, yes, Commissioner. I'll come to you, Damas. Yes, Commissioner, go ahead.
Yeah, with tremendous respect to my learned friend, I think the discussion we are having here is a national discussion, because I feel a little like he's talking like the defense counsel that he is. But to be fair to this discussion, when we talk about the special units have been formed over time, and we know there are many. We have had even the Flying Squad, we have had Kwekwe, which actually eliminated or exterminated the people believed to be Mongeke. Those families are still crying. So when we look at the structure of those formations, we know for a fact the IG can from time to time form units for expedience of the work, because not everybody will go, for instance, to counter terrorists. You know, so we know those that are doing work that Kenyans know about. But over time, those units turns out to become log, because they are now used by the officers, perhaps by the DCI, for his own purposes. When I say that, I'm saying that out of investigations that we have done that have led us to believe that even the senior officers who are giving command to these junior officers are as culpable as possible. So when the president wakes up one morning and disbands this unit, he is clear in his mind. He has intelligence of what has been going on within those units. So what we are saying is that whenever those units are formed, one, they should not be secretive. Two, we know for a fact who forms those units. When you say that the IG, the DCI is a junior officer, I don't know whether you live in this Kenya and you know the outgoing DCI and what atrocities that we are looking at right now, what we are talking about right now. So we know for a fact where the problem lies. Even if you have an IG who is independent, there are formations under him. And if there is no political goodwill, or if there is politics within the National Police Service that are targeted to a particular issue, then that is where the problem comes in. That's where the log officers or the log unit must be snitched on the bad. So what I'm saying is that those special units are, some of them are used for purposes of even those extrajudicial killings. We cannot rule that.
There's an abuse. You talked about expediency.
Yes, but there's an abuse. Yeah, over time. They start very well.
Okay, but you admit that there has been an abuse.
Absolutely. Okay. There have been an abuse over time of those special units.
Yes, Demas.
Yeah. I think it's important to note, first of all, that when these police reforms came, they were not supported by everyone. I think people, especially within the executive, wanted the status quo to remain, because they had this Inspector General or Police Commissioner who was beholden to them totally. There was no menace of IPOA and such. And if you look at even the Constitution, that Article 245, where the Minister of Interior is allowed to give directions to the Inspector General is only to do with policy issues. The minister cannot give operational issues. But what we saw, especially in the last administration, was the minister saying, I have directed the Inspector General to arrest so-and-so, to do this and that. That was unconstitutional, totally. The only other person who can give direction to the Inspector General is the DPP with regards to a case that he needs investigated, right? And that is the legal position. However, that's not what we saw. Then, in the Security Laws Amendment Act in 2014, and I argued that case, there was something that was created in a way to remove the powers of the National Police Service Commission. And that was something called the National Police Service Board, Disciplinary Board. But through our arguments, that was declared unconstitutional.
Scrapped out.
Yes. Then, weirdly, after the first commission left, and they had done vetting. You remember the infamous police vetting. This commission that is there right now came in and then pardoned about 300 officers immediately. And then even when the BBI process came through and recommended the scrapping of the National Police Service Commission, they had nothing to say about it. And it was them who were going to go home. So, as Commissioner is saying here, the National Police Service Commission needs to wake up to its mandate under the Constitution, to its mandate for police officers. We need their voice in this matter.
But there seems to be an overreach, Wakili, isn't it, of even the doubts that were expressed on the formation of the National Police Service, the recommendations by Ransley, and there were some doubts even by the American and the British governments as to how this will be actualized when the proposals were presented to President Mwai Kibaki by Ransley in the recommendations that had recommended the formation of the National Police Service, and even up to a point, a cable that is from the U.S. Embassy, this was in the WikiLeaks website, had said The only one time for much-needed police reform. The UK government shares our doubts, it said, but it will support the Commission financially by paying for a United Kingdom and a Commonwealth police expert to serve the people of the Republic of Kenya. If the government of Kenya acts to implement the real reform, we are positioned to support the effort with funds. However, several prominent persons have expressed doubts about the government's motives in establishing the police service. They note that the short 90-day mandate is far too little for such a massive task, and the Police Commissioner Hussein Ali will act to thwart all but superficial reforms. And we share some of these doubts, but we'll take a wait-and-see approach, recognizing that the National Police Service has provided an opportunity, the only one time, for much-needed police reforms in the country. And he talked about the 2014 Security Amendment laws in Parliament, debated acrimoniously by the then Jubilee Party, willy-nilly. And these are some of the issues that, Wakili, you agree with me. The former leader of the majority party, now defense CS, Adan Duale, regretted. He said, I naively pushed some of the agendas. I therefore call unto you, members of Parliament, to consider institutions and the place of the Constitution. Commissioner talked about goodwill when we started the conversation. Going forward, then, how does the political class need to understand the importance of the same, owing to the history that I've just enumerated on?
First, a good friend of mine, a senior lawyer called Cliff Umbeta, all the way from where he is telling me, I tell Commissioner here that it is only the IG who creates special units. And you have seen, it is not Mohamed Amin who disbanded the SSU. It is the acting IG.
Nur Gabo.
That is the position of the law. The director of DCI is a very junior officer in terms of the IG. That is position. But the image he had, Kinoti's image, is all over. You see everybody here is talking about Kinoti. Kinoti was not in charge of the IG. The IG was Matiambai, and that is the office with the constitutional office. Let us deal with the way forward, Ayuba, as you have asked it. The question security needs to go back to Parliament. Proper laws are formed. The security laws that were formed were politically instigated. Duale now sees that as a mistake. And is very, very remorseful. For how long will Cabinet Duale be remorseful? When again he becomes in the opposition, will he, or in Parliament, will he not have the same approach? Politicians will always have sectarian interests that are time-specific. And this is why I'm saying the 2014-2015 movement towards restructuring the police was politically right. When it was politically wrong, they abandoned that issue. Today, it is politically right to disband units. Commissioner has said it very clearly that units have been there from the Muzungu time, colonial time. This is a normal operational way worldwide. It's not a Kenyan question. But when we want to politicize issues, we bring in that question. The way forward should be a proper research. They have done researches, presented to the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee at Parliament. A proper discussion comes up, like this one that we are discussing, so that proper legislation is grounded. Do we need the police that is permanent, or do we need a police service that serves the head of state, so that they are also, after 5 years, when Uhuru leaves, the police leave. When William Ruto comes in, His Excellency, he employs his own police officers. So that we do not, because when you say, and I don't know why the framers of the Constitution left the police under the executive. It was not by mistake. Why the police service is left under the executive? Kenyans should understand that it is the only reason, because it is the tool to govern the country. National security was not devolved. Why? Because of the questions of the command structure. The national security question is an economic question.
All right.
Is an interglobal, intercountry question. The way we deal with our security questions affects regions that we are bordering us. That is why the UK, the US are saying they are concerned. They were concerned, they will be concerned, they are going to be concerned. Lastly, when we look at our country where it is and the question of terrorism, we have been hit severally. We have been hit severally. We are likely to see an upsurge of terrorism because the more we demoralize the police, the more we demoralize security agencies, we are exposing ourselves to serious attacks from within and from outside the country. My appeal could be, this should be the last discussion about security. Let security matters be dealt with behind the curtains so that the experts deal with security. Quacks have taken the role to provide advices. We are not security-trained people. We are legal-trained people. Really, in my own view, my take could be, let this debate end. Let the board deal with it. For example, Commissioner now here, he's demonizing the police, and he has been brought here by the security of the police. Everybody needs the police.
But he clearly talked about the importance of the police service in the country, talking about the professionally well-grounded police officials. He talked about it earlier. On record for it. Yes, Commissioner, go ahead.
He has defended them.
Thank you very much. You know, defense councils are famboos. I'm one myself. So I excuse my learned friend. But more importantly, we have a very progressive constitution in this country. And I do not think we need more laws or security laws as such. And even those that were brought before Parliament, I was a parliamentarian then, and I do not think they served any useful purpose. I think what we need here, we need a concerted effort to follow the laws that we have formed, to go by the law, to go by the book. Because even those special units we are talking about, if the law is followed, then we would not be having this discussion. But when we make more laws, when we have not even followed those that we have already made, I don't think we are making this country safer. Secondly, I don't see any problem discussing security issues. The Constitution has given a wide mandate to Kenyans to access information. I know they are privileged information that perhaps cannot be discussed openly. But this kind of a discussion is very healthy. The Kenyans are asking questions on extrajudicial killings, on enforced disappearances. How else will they know if we lock out this discussion from the public? So this discussion is important. We are public and state officers, and we should be scrutinized, we should be interrogated, and we should be asked what we are doing for the country. And I know for a fact the president is has a very serious resolve. I have seen the 2 pillars on extermination of extrajudicial killings, and I have also seen the one for enforced disappearances. But I want to say this, there is an international convention on prevention of people from enforced disappearances. And I know Kenya is a signatory, but we haven't ratified that convention. So with the president now moving the way he's moving, I would want to urge that Kenya to ratify that convention so that now we become properly under the ambit of the international treaties that will enable us eliminate extrajudicial killings and forceful disappearances. Lastly, and this is just to mention, I want to tell the public that in the course of our investigations at the independent policing, we have mapped out situations where escalation of these extrajudicial killings and enforced disappearances have emerged. And we have seen since 2010, when the Constitution was promulgated, we opened up board and bail issues to all manner of crimes, robbery with violence, murder, treason, everything. And we saw the spike now started licensing of extrajudicial killings. Because once the police charge somebody, say for instance, motor vehicle carjackings or robbery with violence, the next week the person is out on board. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to have people out on board, because I also know police used to arrest people and frame them with robbery with violence and keep them in for 3 years. But the moment now the board and bail became more liberal, we started seeing those police killings. So we suspect that the moment the officers arrest people, allowing them to court, and then the people are released, now they become clear rivals. So it's who gets who first.
Okay, and it's the case of the now dispensed matter in the case of Frederick Leliman and the case of
the Willie Kimani case,
and the taxi driver who were killed in 2016, but now that matter dealt with by Judge Jesse Lesate and awaiting the sentencing. Yes, Demes, go ahead, please, with the final comments.
I think, first of all, politicizing this debate is not wise, but it is almost inevitable because what has triggered, we suspect, what has triggered this new resolve against extrajudicial killings is because certain people were disappeared and were found, right? And it is a fact that police officers have been used for political ends in the past. And so how do we depoliticize policing in this country is a very good place to start. We need officers to serve us and not to serve the regime. You know, understand, as much as it's the regime's ultimate mandate to keep us safe, the police officers should be the ones to use their training, their policy direction from Parliament and the executive to safeguard us. And also, when we talk about extrajudicial killings, we are handling these cases. For example, the Baby Pendo case. This was a child in a house and was bludgeoned to death.
Okay.
Through an inquest, the courts found that certain commanders needed to be charged because it really didn't come out who hit that child in the head, this baby in the head, but it came out who was in charge of that formation.
All right.
And so I think we are beginning to move towards command responsibility, which we did not have before. So we need to have individual and command responsibility to ensure that we live in a safer society ruled by the rule of law.
Okay.
I think it's important to acknowledge that Baby Pendo case and the inquest that's the work of the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, and we are expecting to see more than 15 officers taking plea.
Well noted. Let's now sample some of the feedback on the Twitter hashtag Daybreak at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Here's what's coming up on your screens. Agumba Steve says the Kenya National Security has for a long time been a bed of corrupt individuals in all the categories. For this to be solved, it's not only disbanding the various bodies, but rather starting from the recruitment to promotions. Corruption is killing this noble service. Up next is MC_rumors. He says we are not condemning the good work being done by our police officers. Statement also made by Commissioner Waiganjo. Kenya is a country governed by the rule of law. Raw cops should be held accountable. What is the work of our courts if the police are arresting and killing alleged criminals? Engineer Lazaro says IPOA should be more professional when dealing with the engine of police force, the DCI, or else the ongoing purge will leave the country with the demoralized police force. Bobo Tieno Owino says, I'm afraid condemnation of the Kenya police too much against extrajudicial killings will risk security of our country and encourage criminal activities without looking into their affairs, more so financially. Michuki PN says we must fix the entire justice system. Sometimes police are helpless when facing criminals like terrorists. It's hard to convict such elements. Kipingeno Headboy says perhaps extrajudicial killings might be a thing of the past if we appoint career officers to serve as cabinet secretaries in the ministries of Interior and Defense. S. Sawe says police reforms and good remuneration is key. Special units are equally important. Remember, we have hardcore criminals. How will we deal with them? Units are there all over the world to serve special purposes. Thank you so much for your time. Wakili Danstan Omari, your time is all appreciated. Many thanks for making time on Daybreak. Demas Kiprono is the campaign manager, Amnesty International Kenya. Thank you for your time. And JM Waiganjo is a commissioner with the Independent Policing and Oversight Authority. Up next is Health and Lifestyle. Dr. Dan Gikonyo, cardiologist, will be here alongside Dr. Premand Ponoth, who is also a surgeon. They will be here to talk more about heart issues and the heart conditions. This will be coming up next year on Daybreak. And many thanks for making time on the broadcast. That's all appreciated and cherished. We can't do, of course, without you. That's why we sample your feedback and making Daybreak your #1 show. You are on time. We were on air. I am Ayub Abdikadir Abdi. We'll see you next week here on the broadcast. Good morning.